Hello. Boris's dossier. This is supposed to be absolutely central and fascinating and new evidence. There's nothing new in it, really, except two extraordinary bits of information. Number one, that the joke that Boris said that this must be the most unsocially distanced event going on in the country. He doesn't remember making that joke, and the fact that he made observations about socially distanced events doesn't mean that he was conceding that this was a breaking of the laws or the rules or the guidance. Just bizarre. The whole document, it's not evidence, it's a rhetorical flourish couched in the most Jesuitical language that I think I have heard since I was at university. And then I was taught at one point by Jesuits. And so I did have first-hand knowledge of this sort of extraordinary language. He accepts that he has in fact misled Parliament, but he says to justify it that what he said was done in good faith. It was not intentional, and he was not reckless. He seems to be the person who's introducing this word reckless. I wondered where it had come from. Nadine Dorries was very keen on it, but this is probably where it comes from, reckless. And it's different to deliberately or knowingly. So, was he reckless? Yes, absolutely. Insofar as he caused problems and he was unthinking. That's what the word means, and that's quite interesting. So if that is the charge, that he's been reckless, I don't think that he can really get away with this, because it is about thoughtlessness. And Boris Johnson has acted thoughtlessly. Now, one of his defences might have been, if he was facing the charge of knowingly misrepresenting the truth, knowingly misleading Parliament, then he could play the clown and play the fool. But I think the Privileges Committee is specifically trying to avoid that. Anyway, the second issue is that it should be clear, he says, to everybody in the committee, from all the investigations that have taken place, that no evidence exists to support that he misled Parliament, except the assertions of the discredited Dominic Cummings, and that Dominic Cummings doesn't provide any documentary support for his allegations. Extraordinarily venomous attack on Cummings in the paperwork, in the 52-page document. Number three, this argument which we heard from Nadine Dorries. Why would Boris break the rules, break the guidance, if he had an official photographer around? It's implausible that he would keep an official photographer around if he was planning to break the rules. So whatever he did, he didn't know about it. He didn't know it was wrong. He talks about immortalizing these events with official photography. That's a little bit grand, isn't it? The fourth point, that is a slight change in his tone, and he attacks the committee itself for going beyond its own terms of reference, for having no proof of intent to mislead the House, and therefore, if they can't prove that he intended to mislead the House, then there is no contempt for Parliament, and therefore he can get away with it. He goes on a great deal about the fact that this committee is partisan. Well, there are some Conservatives in the committee. So I'm not sure he can use that, but he can try. He can try. I didn't know, he says, that events may have escalated after I left. That's a get-out clause. As for the birthday, he says, well, the cake wasn't eaten and no one sang happy birthday. Poor me. But it's this attack on the committee, the attack on their integrity, the attack on whether they are doing things appropriately, fairly, whether they can see the difference between regulations and guidance, whether indeed the reports they've already produced, the interim report they've already produced, has selected its evidence too impartially. It's a selective choice of evidence, and it prejudices the committee against him before he's even given his testimony. The other thing which he points out is that no advisors gave him advice to tell him that the rules were broken. Nobody told me. But then nobody probably stands around and tells a murderer that they're committing murder. You're just supposed to know. And presumably if you are the Prime Minister and you are behind making these rules, you ought to know what the rules are. So his dossier, which should be full of evidence, is a rhetorical flourish. On the one hand, criticising the committee for being partisan, and this almost certainly is an attempt to reach out beyond the testimony on Wednesday to the House of Commons and to his friends in the House of Commons and those who are sitting on the edge, sitting on the fence, to encourage them to fall behind him, that this is a witch hunt. That's actually literally what Rishi Sunak was asked this morning on breakfast television. Is this a witch hunt? And he was very reluctant to say yes. He didn't. He ducked the question. But he ducked quite a lot this morning. So if this is a politically charged attack, then maybe he can get the Conservative Party as a whole to swing behind him. That's difficult. But by publishing the dossier and by making it public, it's also not only the Conservative MPs who he hopes to get behind him, but their party members as well. Those important party members who voted for Liz Truss to become Prime Minister and who still treasure a longing for Boris Johnson in their hearts. So that's one part of the dossier. That's one purpose of the dossier. And the other one is to ratchet up the question about whether or not he misled the House of Commons with intent, deliberately, recklessly, knowingly. And it's playing around with the meaning of those words. And there's a lot of legal thought that's gone into this. But it's the sort of legal thought which, frankly, I would expect from the late Middle Ages, and particularly from the pen of Ignatius Loyola, from the Jesuits. The Jesuits, this could have been written by a Jesuit. I'm not surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if it was. Somebody who had been at school at Stonyhurst or something. This has the mark, the imprimatur of the Counter-Reformation all over it.